What's going on, guys? This is Alex Tex Kate. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about my Dan Wesson DWX, its aftermarket parts support, as well as its compatibility. I'm also going to touch on the gear that I use to run this gun and a little bit of, so far, the few things that you can get out there. We're hoping for more, but let's talk about what's out there. Before we go any further, if you like what you're seeing, if you kind of like what you're seeing, to please like, comment, and subscribe for me. Let's get back to it. The Dan Wesson DWX. Now, they have upped the cost just a hair on these as they've dropped a few more parts, but they announced it in 2019. It didn't show up until essentially 2023, and we didn't see any aftermarket part support at all until this past summer when CZ decided to finally offer us some of the parts. So as you'll see here up on CZ's website, they have the most aftermarket parts that you can get. Now, it isn't really aftermarket. They are just stock replacement parts for the most part, but there is an increase on cost in the few here that were available before. Is what it is, but at least now there's something out here. So you got your slide stop spring, slide stop, ejector, grips, base pads, ambi safety, single-sided safety, extractor pins, but there is no more pins available besides that. So if you're going to take the thing apart, be careful, because getting replacement pins, you're going to likely wait a little while because you're going to have to call Dan Wesson's kind of really crappy customer support. Speaking of CZ Custom, you can also get a handful of things on their site, as well as just base pads, optic plates. You can get the DWX in the compact, and they do offer a hammer replacement. It is the stock hammer, but at least that's a place to get the hammer. Moving on. The grips are CZ75, but the magwell is a Taxport magwell. So, if you look on Lock Grip's site, any of the Shadow 2 grips are going to work with your DWX. The shorts will work for the magwell just like with the Shadow 2. Now you go on to Cajun Gunworks. Now if you want a custom one, you want it done, you want it to be ported, comped, skeleton cuts, done trigger, if you want that thing to really run, you send it to Cajun Gunworks. They really don't offer any parts for us yet, but they can get the job done for you at the least. So hats off to them. So moving on to Henning and Taylor Freelance. They both offer base pads for this as well as CZ Custom, but I run Hennings here. They work great for me. Again, these are P10F magazines. So that's what you're going to need as far as a base pad goes. This is going to be the P10F/DWX. Both Taylor Freelance and Henning both offer some. The one nice thing about Henning is they actually offer a replacement rear sight and a rear sight screw for those limited shooters. Moving on to Ben Stoger's Pro Shop. You can get guide rod, Floyd's magwell. You can get fully built magazines that look like they come with the Henning, optic plates, again, base pads like your Hennings, your Taylor Freelance, then your springs and followers, in which I use the Rune Tactical springs and followers on all of my guns, especially my DWX. So that's all available on Ben Stoger's Pro Shop. Now, moving on to parts compatibility before we go into the gear that I use personally for the DWX. As you can see here, it is definitely a love child. So it is a mix of a 1911 and then it says CZ parts, right? Well, CZ parts, it means P10 magazines, Shadow 2 grips, grip screws that still use the grip screws that come with the gun because your Shadow 2 grip screws will not work. Your extractor pin is going to be P10F, I believe. Same with extractor spring, the rear sight, extractor, and then magwells are going to be, again, Taxport magwells. Moving over to the 1911 side, you can see that it is a good chunk of the internals. But, of course, you still have some over on the proprietary side as well. but the majority of those finicky little parts are over on the 1911 side. So at least you have that ability. If you lose a pin, source the part through 1911 parts, and then you won't have to wait for that long-term customer service that I was talking about earlier. When you get over to the proprietary parts, you have the other chunk of quite important parts. And the one that upsets me the most is the trigger bow. I was really hoping myself when I got this gun that I was going to be able to swap it out between the variety of 19 and 2011 triggers that are out there on the market, but we were sadly mistaken. But as we saw on CZ's page, they do offer a large variety of triggers. That was kind of the first thing that it seems they prioritized, was fancy triggers. But hey, whatever. They're making us do the work. It is what it is. It can be done. Now, moving on to my gear here. This is my double alpha belt. I use the Lynx belt. To run this, I use a Henning T1000 hanger with a Shadow 2 Hydra P holster. Now, that is only because I run a gas pedal on my Shadow 2, and this little slot here allows for me to run both guns in one holster. So I also have my, I guess you could say, speed holster for it, which is my Big Dog Steel. I actually sent them my gun so that they could do the mold for the DWX, and I got one in return, and this holster is absolutely phenomenal. So that's one to look for. It does have a lock on it, and it does use the, I'm not sure what this mount is particularly called, but for the T1000, so I can just swap that back and forth between the two. Lastly, I also have a GX for it. This is GX product. Leif makes a great holster. The only reason I don't have this on is because of the cross compatibility thing. I'm kind of saving these two for other belts. One's going to go on a duty belt and the other one's going to go on a secondary race belt. And I'm sort of hoping that when I buy a Masterpiece Arms that it might fit here as well. So to hold my magazines, I use the DWX mounts for the Henning magnetic mounts. Now, I don't recommend these magnetic mounts if you're a bigger guy. I've noticed the bigger dudes kind of knock the magazines off. I'm pretty thin. I'm like 5'10" and 170 pounds. So, you know, I'm pretty slimline. I've only maybe knocked off one magazine ever, and that was me running into a wall. So, again, I just use the P10 versions of these. They work absolutely phenomenally, and I can also put my Shadow 2 magazines in these. They have a hair of play, but it works perfectly. So that's my gear. If you want to see my review on my DWX, go ahead and click that link right there. It will also pop up at the end of this video. But thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this helps somebody at least understand what the DWX is currently about, without really talking or getting too much into any negatives versus positives or likewise. That's just kind of what's out there. I'm sure I'm missing some things, but that's pretty much what I came up with when I was looking around and found enough to at least tell you guys about. So all in all, I do love the thing. I may not love Dan Wesson or love how long it's taken for parts to get out, being it was talked about in 19 or showed at SHOT Show. Didn't come out for another 4 years. I think they're a little behind, but that's okay. I still love the thing. I don't not recommend it, but I don't personally recommend it unless you know what you're getting into. So, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Alex Tex Kate signing off. I will see you guys next time.